Good morning. As you said, my name is Cristina Sills. I am the Agency Records Officer and Acting Senior Agency Official for Records Management for the Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, or CSB for short. We are a micro agency, so we have a little bit of a unique perspective on working with our records. We're also fortunate to be a young agency and are firmly entrenched in our technology, but it doesn't mean we're short on the need for records management solutions. It's an honor to be here with my fellow records and information colleagues this morning to speak with you about the impact of the M19. The first thing I'm going to do is share my thoughts on the call to records and information management, and then the most crucial step in answering that call. First, I want to start with a little bit about my background and my approach to records and information management. Records and information management became important to me fairly early on. In high school, I was part of a competition robotics team that paired local students with engineers from NASA. And it was in here that I had my first taste of what happens when we fail to manage our information. We had a machinist who wasted hours of their costly time and hundreds of dollars in materials, machining the wrong version of a part. It was here when I learned from one of the lead engineers that the engineering challenge of the 21st century will be getting the right information to the right people at the right time in the day and age of computers. Now, that stuck with me for quite a while, but I didn't quite tilt into records management just yet. I continued pursuing mechanical engineering. I went to a college for a BSME, and then later joined the Navy as a nuclear mechanic. It was here I would gain two additional principles that heavily influenced my approach to records and information management today. The first is questioning attitude. This taught me to always question why we're doing something the way we're doing it. Is it the best answer? Is it the most effective way to get what we want? The second was integration. Surprisingly, information management is actually similar to nuclear power. It's a series of integrated processes and systems. But in this case, we're controlling our information instead of harnessing a nuclear reaction. But the principle still applies. By understanding how those processes and systems fit together, we can understand how a problem in one process can send ripples throughout the entire system. Toward the end of my Navy career, I had the opportunity to actually pursue records management full-time. I quickly discovered that the skills I had accumulated through all those years of engineering served me well as a records manager. I had a knack for solving information flow problems and creating records management solutions. I've now been working in the records management sector in the federal government for over 10 years, serving 4 Navy commands, first as a records specialist and then as agency records officer. I then became the electronic records expert for the Director of Navy Records and the enterprise administrator of the Navy's electronic records management application. I'm now serving at the CSB, where I focus on creating practical solutions to information problems. When I first read the M19, I realized this established objectives, but it was my questioning attitude that led me to ask, what are the goals here? While the M19 focuses on transitioning to electronic records, developing government solutions for the 21st century actually establishes the goal to fully transition to electronic business processes and record keeping. It's a call for a comprehensive lifecycle approach to records and information management, and it starts the moment an agency collects information. Combined, the M19 and developing government solutions for the 21st century are not just a call to digitize records. They're a directive to actively and consistently implement records and information management throughout the federal government. So to develop a picture of what changes were necessary to accomplish this, I did a simple gap analysis. I started with what is our current state, what is our target state, what are the gaps, and I began looking for the sources to get from A to B and fill in those gaps. So the guidance to transition to RIM is actually spread throughout numerous laws, regulations, and policies. But the key thing is there's still a fair amount of guidance out there. We're not alone. In this presentation, I will attempt to consolidate some of that guidance, provide a clearer picture of some of the gaps, and then I'm going to provide some additional information on one of the most common gaps in records management programs, the establishment of the senior agency official for records management. So the first thing we need to do is start with our current state. Agency leadership needs to understand that the laws, regulations, and policy already establish records management and information management in the federal government. Transitioning to RIM does not call for a brand new program or drastic measures. It calls for changes to existing programs and how they're doing business. So we can look at the current state of records management and information management as they are. Records policy defines records management as planning, controlling, directing, and the other managerial activities with respect to record creation, maintenance, use, and final disposition. It follows the guidance of 36 CFR, and the efforts are led by agency records officers. This supports the concept of the comprehensive life cycle that begins with information collection that we see in developing government solutions for the 21st century. So there we have one item covered. Information management calls for designing business processes to improve information flow and leverage technology. The rules for it established in Title 44, Chapter 35, and the OMB Circular A130. These efforts are led by the agency Chief Information Officer. And their primary aim is for agencies to rethink and restructure the way work is performed before investing in new information technologies. This too sounds similar to one of our goals in developing government solutions in the 21st century. So agencies have records management and information management, but developing government solutions in the 21st century states that agency efforts are falling short, calling them inconsistent and ineffective. To better understand how records and information management need to fit together, I looked towards current laws and regulations. And when they fell a little bit short, I began looking towards industry guidance as well. ARMA defines records management as a management discipline dedicated to assessing the value of information to determine its retention, control maintenance practices to ensure that it is usable, and then seeing to the proper disposition of that information once its retention is over. Sounds pretty good. ARMA defines information management as a discipline dedicated to assessing information and the flow of that information through business processes. It establishes the information life cycle that starts with its collection through its processing, accumulation, dissemination, capture, and eventual disposition as well. ARMA states that RIM is a combination of these two previously separated disciplines. By combining them, RIM seeks to better link records with business outcomes and processes. Records management portions provide a holistic approach to ongoing management and disposition controls, while information management portions align to provide holistic control over information based on its use and its business value. The combination actually provides the comprehensive life cycle approach called for in developing government solutions for the 21st century. ARMA also states that RIM is the tactical execution of an overarching coordinated information strategy, and that strategy is established through information governance. Information governance will set forth the authorities, supports, process capabilities, and infrastructure that will enable our information to be useful, treat it as an asset, reduce its liability to the organization, and ensure it meets our business requirements while meeting our risk tolerances. Information strategy should be developed as a coordinated effort from all information programs, such as records management, information technology, Freedom of Information Act, Privacy Act, Information Security, Office of General Counsel, and possibly others. It's the integrated management process and part of developing management controls for business processes and information technologies. So we've identified the gaps. Now with a clear picture of our current state and target state, we can review those gaps and look at the guidance in 36 CFR, OMB 130, and even the GAO Green Book for some possible solutions to filling those gaps. Here are the 3 major gaps I identified with our program and how to correct them. Agency records are experts in disciplines to control and maintain records and information. But records management programs are lacking the authority and responsibilities needed to effect the comprehensive controls called for in information management and actively participate in information governance. The M19 and NARA Bulletin 2017 TAC 02 solves this problem by establishing the role of senior agency official for records management. The second, records management and information management are still being treated as separate disciplines under separate programs with separate leadership. This has created work silos that are likely hampering the coordinated efforts needed to effect an integrated records and information management effort. Effective RIM will require a coordinated strategic approach rooted in information governance to unify the efforts of agency information programs. Cooperation and participation of agency leadership and management will be crucial. The OMB 130 proposes the solution to this. It requires information resources strategic planning, which is actually the federal equivalent of information governance. The last gap was that effective information governance will need to be rooted in agency business process design and control and risk management processes. For each mission and administrative program area, taking an active role as stakeholders in developing information management processes and solution needs to become the new norm. Records management programs can provide the ideas and expertise, and the GAO Green Book provides the information to fill in the gap. It integrates information flow design and records management controls as part of developing control activities and monitoring in enterprise risk management. So the key takeaway here is that most of the guidance and the mechanisms to accomplish integrated records and information management already exist in the federal government. The transition will not require reinventing the wheel. It requires reviewing existing programs and taking targeted action to fill in agency gaps. A successful RIM implementation requires more than just digitizing records and capturing email, for example. It requires agency leadership and information programs to fundamentally change how they think about managing their information. Integrated records and information management will provide agency leadership with a valuable tool that will help them transform how the agency conducts its business and improve stewardship of its information and technology resources. This will allow them to achieve the goals of delivering government solutions in the 21st century. So the next thing we need to do is establish the role of the SORM. Establishing the SORM is actually the linchpin to start information governance. The M19 mandates the establishment of this role. NARA Bulletin 2017-02 establishes the level of authority needed and the duties the role will carry out. It is distinctly different from the role of the ARO, The role of the SAORM is to focus on information governance and establishing information management. However, this guidance leaves agencies flexibility in determining how that role will be assigned and where it falls into the agency structure. Agencies will need to consider several things to establish and assign the role so it can effectively carry out its duties. The GAO Green Book provides additional guidance here. I apologize, I need one moment. My computer is attempting to restart. Give me just a moment to cancel this.
Law of the morning, no worries. Waiting for Cristina to deal with the IT issues. Just a couple points to keep in mind. We will make all of today's presentations available for on-demand viewing after the fact to those who have registered for this event. And wherever possible, we will share these slides with the registered attendees. You'll get an email about that in the days to come once we get the videos processed and posted. And I see that a good number of the attendees, but certainly not all, have been taking advantage of the chat room to submit questions and to chat amongst themselves. So thank you for doing that. It makes for a much more robust event. And those of you who have been in watch-only mode, I'd encourage you to get your questions in while you have a chance. But I think we're back and ready to go. Cristina?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Sorry about that. Technology has a mind of its own. So the first thing I did was look to the control environment component of the GAO Green Book, and I simply applied the 5 principles of control environment. The first is that leadership needs to demonstrate a commitment to integrity and ethical values. Sounds fancy, but it's actually quite simple. It starts with setting the tone at the top, establishing standards of conduct, and simply adhering to those standards of conduct. The way this applies to establishing the role of the SAORM is that tone at the top will be a driver to the success of actually establishing information governance and an overall information management plan. By championing initiatives, leadership will demonstrate a commitment to doing what is right, not just managing the minimum level of performance necessary for the program. With strong support at the top, without strong support at the top, RIM efforts will continue to be inefficient and ineffective. Agency leadership must engage and leverage the role of SAORM to implement the transition to records and information management. The second principle is to exercise oversight responsibility. It consists of oversight structure, oversight of controls, and remediation of deficiencies. Reporting relationships meet the requirements set forth in law and policy, but they're also there to ensure communication between leadership and senior agency officials to ensure that RIM objectives align with agency objectives and RIM deficiencies can be dealt with at the appropriate levels. The Federal Record Act requires the head of each agency to maintain an active and continuing program for records management. To this end, the SAORM will act on behalf of the agency head to ensure the agency officially and appropriately complies with all of these regulations, not just records management. In other words, the senior agency official for records management answers directly to the agency head for the accomplishment of information governance and records and information management initiatives at the agency. The next principle is, of course, the linchpin, or the most common question: how to establish structure, responsibility, and authority for the SAORM. Organizational placements and relationships must be established to enable the role to carry out the duties and responsibilities assigned. based on what we just looked at in oversight, the SAOR must be placed high enough to engage, if not directly report to the agency head. They'll also need to be able to engage with the staff that lead other information programs, such as the CIO, Freedom of Information Act, Privacy Act officials, information security officials, and the Office of General Counsel. They will also need to be high enough to ensure they can see across program offices for the development of integrated information management solutions. The next step, once we've figured that out, is to assign responsibility to a person and/or office to carry out the actual duties of the role of SAORM. Normally, agency records officers should not be the SAORM, because the SAORM carries strategic responsibility while the agency records officer has operational responsibilities. However, as my agency discovered, NARA has allowed this in some cases in micro agencies where staffing simply does not permit this. Authority must be delegated sufficient to achieve the directives that the SAORM is tasked with. They'll need sufficient authority to advocate for the program and the resources necessary. So they'll need to be able to work with the chief financial officers, chief operations officers, process improvement officers, and other agency chief officers, as we see in many of the regulations. But we also have to remember the SAORM acts similar to the agency's CIO in that it also serves each mission and administrative area of the agency. We also have to remember that it also has directive control over records and information management. So it will need to be placed high enough where it can issue those directives if necessary. Once this is figured out, the role must be clearly assigned and documented. Now, this is the simplest step. This means simply updating agency records management policy to include the role and its responsibilities. Almost done. The fourth principle is to demonstrate commitment to competence. Well, how does this really affect the SORM? Competence is demonstrated by behavior of individuals as they carry out their responsibilities. So for a qualified SORM, they are considered part of the human capital strategy of the agency and an investment into accomplishing records and information management. While the transition to RIM is newer to the federal government, and information governance and information management are not new professions, establishing the role of SORM may not even require a new position. It may be possible to leverage an existing position where key skills and abilities already align. The next thing would, of course, be to ensure they have sufficient training. SAORMs will require relevant skills and abilities gained largely from professional experience, training, and certifications. NARA provides at a minimum the FCRM, and there is also industry guidance and training available specifically towards information management and information governance. Lastly, we round it out with accountability. Assignment of duties must be reflected in the SAORM's position description. The current Record Specialist series is a good place to start, but many agencies have already pointed out it's not quite adequate to carry the duties of the SAORM position. However, we can look to industry guidance in the interim, which does discuss such responsibilities and positions. The second is to enforce that accountability. This is easy as well. We have the annual assessment and reporting that the agency does with NARA, and the SAORM should ensure that the agency head also receives and is part of this review process. And of course, training is available from NARA for agency heads to assist them in understanding the actions of the Records and Information Management Program, expectations, and what strategies and plans should look like when looking at these reporting processes. So to summarize, The requirement for the senior agency official for records management has been around since 2012, and most agencies have established the role. But many have been struggling with one aspect or another in establishing the SORM as an effective leader for records and information management. By examining the 5 principles for effective control environment, agencies should be able to identify their shortfalls and solidify and enable their new senior agency official for records management. From there, we can embrace the transition to records and information management. Start by establishing the role with care towards carrying out its mission. Commit to records and information management and commit towards improving agency operations. Invest in the human capital needed for this role. It is possible the establishment of the role of SAORM may not require a new position and may instead leverage an existing position. Some options have been chief operations officers or chief information officers within the agency. In some cases, even the agency records officer. When considering possible assignment like this, ensure the existing position is not sufficiently encumbered so that it may carry out these new duties. Also ensure that it aligns with the key skills and responsibilities of the position. Candidates may need additional training and mentorship to fully develop their competencies in fulfilling the role. Next is to make the organizational reforms necessary to support the role. The position leverage may need organizational relationships changed or established. Reporting relationships to the agency head will be necessary for oversight. Relationships with other information programs for sound cooperation must be established in order to stand up information governance. Then ensure mission and administrative program managers are aware of the role and the benefit it provides to them. Lastly, leverage the records and information management program to improve agency stewardship of information and technology resources. In short, use it to deliver the reforms of developing government solutions of the 21st century.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Sills, and appreciate you bringing the micro-agency perspective and also soldiering through the hiccups that come with the virtual event. We're running behind schedule, and I want to make sure we give our last speaker his full allotted time. I promise we'll get everyone wrapped up here by noon. But Cristina, what I would suggest is there are a few questions that are very specific to what your agency is doing, and if we could take those into the chat room, I'll round them up and I'll post them again here in a moment. And if you could go into the detail there, because I don't think we have time to answer them in the detail they warrant.
Okay.
So with your consent, I will move the Q&A to the chat room for this session.
That's fine. Have a good morning.